we put on for law enforcement in this committee, and then the committee of the whole amendment. Is that correct? I believe we've lost you, so we'll come back to that, and we'll go ahead and go to proponent testimony. We do have a virtual, so we're going to go ahead and skip to Ed Klump. He is here to testify in person, so we'll go ahead and go to him and then circle back to the virtual. Ed, welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. We are here in support of this bill, much as we were in support of Senate Bill 83. We appreciate the amendments that were put on. However, we think there needs to be one minor change to that amendment, and that's what I'd like to address. I am Ed Klump. I'm here representing the Kansas Association of Chiefs of Police, Kansas Sheriff's Association, the Kansas Peace Officers Association. Our focus in this bill is found on page 3, lines 8 through 13, relating to information to be shared with law enforcement, and then the other portion immediately following that deals with sharing information with the prosecutors. Mr. Chairman, I know this is unusual and hard to do in the virtual world, but I brought copies of Senate Bill 83, just the pages with the amendments, and I have sufficient copies for the committee and the staff. Could I hand those out for reference?
That would be greatly appreciated. Thank you, Ed.
I feel like probably I've inadequately covered all of our concerns in this, and I want to maybe approach this a little bit different way today. Probably the Child Death Review Board has the most comprehensive compiled information on these child death cases in the state. And I think that's important to recognize. And I want to also recognize that the AG's office and the other proponents know much more about the details of what they have and how the inner workings of the Child Review Board works. So, but with that said, there's 3 scenarios I'd like to talk about specifically. The first scenario is that a child's death has occurred as a result of abuse or neglect, but no law enforcement investigation has taken place. And so if you look at House Bill 2062 on page 3, lines 8 through 13, you will see that that language covers that scenario right now. They have information that we do not have, and they rule that a child's death is a result of abuse or neglect. If you look at Senate Bill 83, lines 10 through 17, you will see that that scenario is not covered with the amended language. And that's because of the word "and" at the end of line 15, which means that all 3 of those criteria in A, B, and C have to be met. And in this case, the provision in C would not be met because there is no law enforcement investigation. And we don't think that's achieving exactly what the intent of this bill is. I mean, one of the worst case scenarios is that there is a child abuse, neglect, death, and we aren't even aware of it to investigate it and find out who was responsible for that death. And so if that "and" was changed to "or," it would take care of that. The second scenario is a child's death has occurred. Law enforcement investigation has been conducted, but we haven't been able to confirm the abuse or neglect occurred. But the Child Death Review Board has information that would help us to confirm that. And in that case, you will see that both the provisions in 2062 and the amended Senate Bill 83 would address that issue, okay, because all 3 criteria are met there. The third scenario is where a child's death has occurred. Law enforcement investigation has concluded that abuse or neglect has occurred, but the Child Death Review Board has information where they rule it was not a result of abuse or neglect. And in that case, we would stand to potentially have the information contained in state agencies that would avoid an innocent person being convicted of a crime. And if you look at that scenario, neither 2062 language nor the Senate Bill 83 language would cover that. But it would in the Senate Bill 83 amendment if the "and" on the end of line 15 was changed to "or." So, Mr. Chairman, our recommendation here is to amend House Bill 2062 with the amendments that you made in Senate Bill 83, with the exception of changing that word "and" to "or." And it would cover all three of these scenarios, which are all very critical for us providing justice, not only to the victims, not only to the victims' families, but assuring we do justice to those who may be suspected of causing these injuries to the child. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll stand for questions.
Ed, thank you for your testimony. Senator Petty has a question.
Thanks, Ed. It's good to see you. So just so I understand this, so in line 15, on what you handed out,
On Senate Bill 83, yes, ma'am.
yes. On line 15, you're suggesting to change "and" to "or."
Yes.
And so,
Then also you'd want to do that on line 23 for the prosecutors.
okay.
And you see by doing that, instead of just covering one of these scenarios, it covers all three. And that's what we'd proposed in our testimony on Senate Bill 83 was an "or."
Committee, do we have any further questions for Ed? Okay. Ed, not seeing any. And it still looks like we are still having technical difficulties for anybody virtually, so I do apologize. I know we do have Michelle Johnson, Senior Assistant for the AG's office, and I believe that is it.
Mr. Chairman, I don't believe Michelle has seen our testimony today, and I want to acknowledge she's going to be kind of at a loss here from the standpoint of what we're suggesting.
To have information that wasn't previously known to law enforcement or prosecutors, the death was from abuse or neglect. And then the language that was added was and that the board had knowledge of a law enforcement investigation involving the child. Our concern about that was if we had a situation where it was initially thought to be a SIDS case or a natural death for some reason, and then it was determined later on that it was actually due to abuse or neglect, and that information somehow didn't get back to law enforcement, that they may never have really opened an investigation to begin with. So we wanted to make sure that we could give them that information in that type of a situation to make sure that we were giving the accurate information to the people that needed to know. The second amendment was done on the floor, as Jenna said, that would create an exception to the confidentiality provision so we could provide information to local boards. And our concern with that was not sharing information because, you know, obviously we want everybody that needs the information to have accurate information so we can all make good decisions. But that mechanism would work a little bit differently than all of the other state child death review boards that we are familiar with. Generally, what happens is that the local information is given to the state child death review board, not the other way around. So we wanted to make sure that we weren't turning into sort of a clearinghouse where a local agency would provide us information, then we would turn around and send it back to their local child death review board. So in effect, we'd be sending them the reports that they probably already had access to. Additionally, our second concern with that was related to the ability to know what happened to the information after we've sent it back to the board, after we sent it back to the local board, because there aren't any statutes that would govern how those individual boards might be set up. So we just didn't have any ability to know what would happen with the information after we sent it back to them, which was a concern to us. So our ask at this point is for you to pass House Bill 2062 without any amendments to it. And I'd be happy to answer any questions about the underlying bill or the amendments that the committee might have.
Michelle, thank you for your testimony. In committee, I would like to let you know that Abby Collier, the Director for the National Center for Fatality Review and Prevention, and Sarah Hortenstein, Executive Director for the State Child Death Review Board with the Kansas Attorney General's Office. Both of those ladies are attending virtually, that they can answer any questions if we have those for them. So at this time, committee, we will open up for questions. Senator Petty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And this is a question for Michelle. Michelle, do we have your testimony or is it listed as Melissa?
It's Melissa.
I'm sorry. On here it says Michelle, and then on my testimony it said Melissa. Okay, I'm sorry, Melissa.
No problem.
So because I'm very interested in the local piece, and actually I offered an amendment that went onto the bill on the Senate side. So, you know, I'm concerned about your point. So if a local, I mean, in my community, child deaths are a major issue. And so there is a board in place, and they do want to have the information specific to our county so that they can look at how, as a community, we can address these issues. So I'm from your testimony, I'm trying to understand why that's not important.
It is important, and we aren't trying to say in any way, shape, or form that it is not. And we applaud the efforts in Wyandotte County that they're making to try and do a similar analysis of what's going on in their community. Our concern is that Wyandotte County, it's our understanding, already has memorandums of understanding in place with all of the agencies that are involved. So they have access to all of their information already. And they, I think, are defining their parameters a little bit differently than the State Child Death Review Board statutory requirements as far as the age of child that we look at, and their information would be specific to Wyandotte County. We just don't want to be in a situation where we request all of the information from Wyandotte County, then we get a request from them that says we would like your information, and then we turn around and send them back all of their own information, because it just doesn't seem very efficient that way. And most boards operate where the local information would be provided to the state, so we could compile that into the state statistics, not the other way around. And I think Abby Collier is probably in a better position to talk about how the boards work generally than I am, but that's our understanding. We aren't trying to do anything to get in the way of what Wyandotte County is doing as far as operating their local team. We're just trying to make sure that the information flow works as efficiently as possible.
And thank you. And I do believe that's exactly what they want too, but they want to have access to the information in timely manner so that they can address the information as a community. And this is a #1 issue for Wyandotte County on their legislative agenda. So it is very important. And it seems like you both want the same thing. And I guess what I would say is that we want to see childhood deaths reduced, where no matter what county we're talking about. And if it's a major issue, I would think that we want to look at every avenue we have available to make that happen. So thank you.
And Melissa, I apologize for calling you Michelle. That was on my notes, so please forgive me for that. Just a question following up on what Mr. Klump had to say. Would you be okay with the change that he suggested, changing that "and" to "or"? Would that alleviate your concern that you had?
It would eliminate a portion of it, but our request is to pass the bill without any amendments. I think once you start talking about, any case that there's a criminal investigation, then that leaves it to the board to determine what qualifies as a criminal investigation. Is that an officer responded, or is that an officer opened a case, or a lot of sort of gray area that's going to become a lot of clerical functions for the board and really distract from what the board's intention is. I don't think that adding any criminal investigation is really going to add a lot to what law enforcement is doing, and it may generate a lot of extra paperwork for them as far as us sending information on any child death where they may have opened a case. I don't know that that's going to contribute a lot to what they're doing. I think that the ability of us to provide information for abuse and neglect situations and have a very targeted approach in what we send out to them is going to help protect confidentiality, and it's going to get to the heart of what law enforcement is really concerned about, that somewhere along the line there was an abuse and neglect death that we just didn't have all the pieces to put together.
Melissa, thank you. Committee, do we have any further questions? Not seeing any. Committee, that does wrap up our proponent testimony. Is there anybody here wanting to speak as a proponent on House Bill 2062? Not seeing any. We do not have any neutral testimony listed. Is there anybody here wanting to testify as a neutral? Not seeing any. We also did not have any opponents. Is there anybody wanting to speak as an opponent? Not seeing any. Committee, we will now close the hearing on House Bill 2062. Yesterday, we had a hearing on Senate Bill 295, and I had made the comment that I wanted to work it yesterday, but we did have some objections, so I said we were going to work it today. In light of the new information that came out of the press release that we were not told of or informed of while we were having our meeting, I think we're going to wait. We might work this tomorrow or the next day, 295. I just want to get a little bit more information on what that process is before we take that up. Again, I was really disappointed that while we were here having that conversation with the secretary, that at the very least, he didn't and let us know there was a press release coming out later that day. We could have taken that in a whole new direction. So with that, I do apologize. That was my intention, but because of new information that came out, we are going to change that up a little bit. I do want to work the two bills that we heard last week. House Bill 2254 and House Bill 2262. And I would like to work House Bill 2254 first. Jenna, could you give the committee a update or a new overview of House Bill 2254, please?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Thank you. I'd be happy to. This is Jenna Moyer in the Revisor of Statutes Office, and House Bill 2254 would increase the monetary cap on those irrevocable prearranged funeral agreements to $10,000. You'll remember that this bill came to us from the House, and the original plan, I guess, as introduced, was to eliminate the cap, and this would put in place instead a $10,000 cap as to the price of a casket, urn, and burial container, which is an increase from the current amount of $7,000. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Committee, do we have any questions for Jenna? Okay, not seeing any. Committee, I do know that Senator Petty.
Go ahead, sir. Go ahead, Mr. Chairman. I'll ask.
Committee, I do know that there was a lot of talk about an amendment or amendments on this bill when we were having the hearing. So what is the pleasure of the committee? Senator Stephan.
Thank you, Chairman. I did ask Jenna to prepare an amendment, just to put an inflationary index on that $10,000.
Committee, we will need a motion to work the bill or something before we start the amendments. So.
I'll make a motion we work the bill.
Okay, have a motion by Senator Petty, a second by Senator Baumgardner to work House Bill 2254. And Senator Stephan, you have an amendment?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I would like to make an amendment that we attach an inflationary index to the $10,000 to keep it relevant through the years. And I think Jenna has that available, I hope.
And
Yes,
Jenna,
Mr. Chair.
Jenna, just for clarification, was it the bill was 7,000 or 7,500, if I remember right? Is that what the amendment is, or does it go back to the 10,000? Because it was amended on the House side.
Yes, I will pull it up, and I think that that will help explain it if that's okay. I'll share my screen here.
Thank you.
And the current law is $7,000. The original bill was to eliminate the cap entirely, and the House amendment put a $10,000 cap on it. And if you'd like me to explain this amendment, this would say that on and after July 1st, 2021, so this year, that amount would be $10,000. And then in 2022 and each year thereafter, it would be adjusted for the CPI or an amount equal to the consumer price index. A little bigger.
Jenna or Donella, you emailed it? Okay, so you should have it. Committee, you should have that in your email to review. As we're reviewing it, Senator Stephan, would you like to discuss that any or comment on your amendment?
I'd be happy to. It's just a means by which to try to keep this bill from coming back every few years. As you'll see, the CPI is a very specific index based on federal data that's put out yearly. So I think it will be relevant through the years and decades even. And it's basically that simple.
Senator Stephan, would you have a question on the amendment?
Did you want to have? I mean, yeah, I do have.
Yeah, okay, Senator Petty has a question on your amendment.
Actually, this is a question not so much for Senator Steffens, but for Jenna. And Jenna, I just, I just wanted to ask you, do we have very many places in statute where we refer to the consumer price index? Because it seems like this has come up in, not with this bill, but in the past, and it hasn't been very popular. So are you aware, or Marissa, of other places in statute where we refer to the consumer price index?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Jen in the revisor's office again. And there are, I don't know if I would say several, but there are places in statute where we refer to the consumer price index. The one specifically that you all may remember, it's related to the base aid for education statutes in 725144 that would increase that base state aid provided to schools each year based upon the inflation amount. And that was passed in 2018, so some of you may be familiar with that. But yeah, it's, I don't know, referred to maybe 20 times or so in statutes. That
Thank
answers your
you.
question.
Jenna, thank you for that. And do we have any further questions on the Stefan amendment? Senator Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just reading that line, maybe for point of clarification, it says, as to the retail price of the casket earned an outside burial container and on and after July 1, 2021, as to the first, I guess I'm just a little confused. I understand what he's trying to do, but I'm just wondering about that wording being inserted and on and after July 21st as to the first 100,000. Do we need that line? Or that on and after? I mean, if we just state that on July 1st, 2022 and each July 1st, 21st after, then you do the CPI. Do you see what I'm saying? I guess I'm a little confused as to why that is where it's at in that sentence. I understand the aim.
Yeah, Senator Thompson, I could be wrong. I'll probably, instead of me trying to muck up the waters, I will let Jenna explain that part. Jenna, would you mind explaining that, please? Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. The reason why that on and after July 1st, 2021 needs to be there is to establish a point of reference to look back to when you look at the consumer price index. Because if you just say, we'll adjust for CPI and you don't have a date in there, then it could be confusing saying, well, which date do we adjust to inflation for? And it does make it a little more clunky, I guess, to read, but I worked on this with a budget revisor, and this is the recommended way to do it.
Apparently this English class was a little bit rough, but I can understand that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any more questions on the Stefan amendment? Not seeing any. Senator Stefan, would you like to move your amendment?
I would. Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to move that we adopt the amendment titled the Stefan Amendment into HB 2254.
Have a motion by Senator Stefan and a second by Senator Gossage. Are there any more discussions on this? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed? No. The ayes have it. That amendment was adopted. Committee, do we have any other amendments? Okay, I do have one. What I would like to do is actually take the contents of House Bill 2262 and insert it into House Bill 2254. Jenna, could you give a refresher on what House Bill 2262 was, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jenna Moyer, Revisor, Statutes Office. And 2262 was related to preparing bodies for a funeral or a cremation. You may remember that Kansas does require a permit to cremate done by the coroner, but for instance, in the state of Missouri, it does not. And so if the death were to occur in another state, it created sort of a little complication. And this would eliminate that requirement in that limited circumstance where a death occurred outside the state of Kansas, but the intent was to cremate the body in the state of Kansas. And it would also allow a coroner's permit to cremate to be submitted electronically rather than by just fax machine.
Thank you, Jenna. Committee, do we have any questions on that explanation? Okay. Without any, I make that motion that we take the contents of House Bill 2262 and insert it into House Bill 2254. Have a second by Senator Baumgartner. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. That motion carries. Committee, what is your pleasure with House Bill 2254? Senator Petty.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we pass out House Bill 2254 as amended, favorable for passage.
I have a motion by Senator Petty, a second by Senator Baumgartner. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Okay, House Bill 2254 as amended is going out on the floor. Committee, that does wrap up everything that I have. I do want to I would like to give everyone a kind of update on what is going on in this committee from here on out. Next week is our last week to hear bills and have committee meetings. We have a lot of bills that we're going to try to work. So I talked to leadership, and if for some reason we cannot get everything accomplished next week, they are going to allow us Monday and Tuesday of the following week to wrap up, do any cleanup. If we do that, it will be our regular scheduled time of 8:30. But to give everyone a heads up as to what we are going to do, Monday we are going to have a hearing on Senate Bill 212. Tuesday, we're going to have a hearing on House Bill 2114 and 2151. Wednesday, we're having a hearing on House Bill 2209 and House Bill 2279. Thursday, House Bill 2116 and House Bill 2224. And then Friday, House Bill 2280. We also have the controlled substance update. That's not been read in yet. That's in the pipelines. We might work on that. I'm not sure yet, but just to give you guys a little update. Senator Petty.
Just as a question on the controlled substance, is that just the annual that you have to do?
That is correct.
I would just like to make a comment that I think this committee, Public Health and Welfare, would be very prudent if we had updated information about what is in the American Rescue Act when it comes to incentives that are health-related. And we do have people on our staff that can provide that information. So I'm just laying it out there. I think that's important that this committee be aware, because those issues are being addressed, are being spoken to about how can federal dollars be used that are coming down to the state, and I think we should be aware.
Thank you, Senator Petty. Do we have anything else before we adjourn? Nothing else to come before the committee? Committee, we are adjourned. Thank you.